English translation. 648th Contact Thursday, the 17th of March 2016, 14:38 hours.
It's good if we do not always have such long correction times, because they are particularly exhausting for Bernadette. Today it was just good and right, which also benefits us because we have more time for our conversation.
The correction time results from the length of the contact conversations you have to record.
Of course it is clear. Look here, one of my flashes of consciousness that I wrote down yesterday.
Idiocy and unreasonableness. If sheer idiocy and unreasonableness are defined, then it means that the same nonsense that was done that brought immense damage and disaster, imbecilely done over and over again, and always expects better results in the process, which is much more of a disadvantage. Simyase Silver Star Center, the 16th of March, 2016, 1250 HRS, Billy.
Interesting, an apartment? But one question.
No, we are still waiting and hoping that what has been said will remain, because then we will no longer have the tiresome problem that we have had to deal with for years. But it would be pointless to talk about it, because firstly it would be pointless, and secondly it would not fit into the order as it should.
I think so too, which is why I would like to address the following in other respects. On the one hand, I understand from your honest and selfless willingness to help that you still help and even support such people again and again, although they denigrate you and accuse you of shameful things, such as that you only want to bind them to you and such nonsense, but that you do not resist and let yourself be exploited. I cannot understand that. You should not let such accusations and insults because they are rest on you. Because people who do such shameful things to you slander you all over the world and lie things to other people about you that do not apply to put you in an evil and bad light. That is also the case in this case, which I have mentioned, whereby it must also be said that the person concerned is not capable of self-help and is too stupid to be able to grasp how profoundly helpful you are to him.
I know that I am being lied to and slandered by this person in line and thread. I know that well, dear friend, but I see no need that I would have to defend myself against it. For my part, I know effectively the truth that I am helping precisely because it is my way of helping, and I do not want any reward or thanks for it. And if I am lied to and slandered for it, then this does not bother me either, because I have a good conscience throughout. And this in contrast to those who lie to me, cheat and slander and believe that I am stupid, and would not realize that I am lied to and slandered by them. Let them believe it, because they will not be happy and satisfied with it, and on the other hand, I do not find any reason to get upset about it, or even have to justify it.
I can understand what you are saying, but I cannot relate to what you are talking about.
You do not have to, because on the one hand you are not standing in my place, and on the other hand, I would not be me if I would orient my thoughts and feelings differently and act differently. If I were to do so, I would certainly not be able to stand up for the mission that demands that I should not be resentful and that I should not be directed towards maliciously judging fellow human beings when they inflict suffering and harm on me with lies and slander in their malice, stupidity and falsehood, etc. If necessary, I simply tell the truth about such people when I am asked about them, and there is a need for a question, or somehow the speech just comes on them, but there is nothing more to it. It's also the case that I tell such people the truth when I am dealing with them, and there's a need for an open conversation. No matter if quiet, loud, or even yelling, but I still keep calm and do not freak out.
I know that. And in fact, I have never experienced anyone who yells around. As you say, but still keeps calm, can control himself as well as you can, and continues to talk quietly and normally with other uninvolved people. With regard to my person, I have to say that I cannot do that. But back to what I also mentioned and asked. It will also solve the problem of incorrect behavior and the lax attitude of the person concerned if, by the 31st of December at the latest, The whole thing is settled, which I believe is necessary because no improvement in attitude and whole behavior can be expected. Such a thing must not be tolerated. Because disharmony, restlessness, and discord arise from it, which must be met in the right way, and that a change for the better and for the good can still result, this is extremely questionable.
I am sure everything will turn out the way it has to be and the way it has to come. This problem can be solved because it is based solely on the fact that we have to wait for the letter, for which there is a deadline of the end of June. So apart from this problem, which has actually already been solved and is no longer one, because according to the statement the relationship is dissolved, there is only one problem. Precisely because Silvano has died, which still has to be solved in a certain detail, but which probably does not cause any difficulties, because we see and consider certain possibilities which can and certainly will bring about a solution. Consequently, we are not faced with an insoluble problem, but simply with the fact that we need a certain amount of time to arrange everything. As a result, all those antagonists who, when Silvano died, rejoiced that the Figu would now get into trouble because an important manpower had failed, got into the nettles. The departure of all these antagonists, who left the mission for reasons of bipolar disturbances or for unresolved personal problems, self-exaltation, and because of their urge for recognition and territory, which could not be fulfilled in the Figu, did not cause any problems, but on the contrary brought good peace into the group again, as well as better and connecting cooperation again, etc. This is because all tasks which these ex-members had to take over and fulfill in the Figu could easily be taken over by other group members and could also be fulfilled to the satisfaction of all without any problems. Problems were only caused by the failure of Silvano. But, as already mentioned, they could be solved for the most part quickly by the commitment of all. Therefore, there was only one problem, and only one problem pending, namely, the succession for Silvano. But even this matter can be solved, so there is no reason to cause panic and throw the gun at the grain. Because perhaps due to a lack of overview and fear, the situation is overestimated and the existing possibilities are not properly assessed. For my part, I would like to discuss the following with you.
And if you discuss the whole matter next Saturday at your meeting, then the waves will also subside, which will surge up with one or the other member and unnecessarily and even inconsiderately raise concerns with them.
There will be a lot to discuss, that is clear. But it is really possible to cope with everything with a little reason and without scaremongering. And problems are always there to be solved and overcome. Besides,
however, there are unnecessary fears among members who were not there from the beginning. So they should think about what burdens had to be borne at the beginning and what hurdles had to be overcome by all the Figu founding members. At that time, everything was really such that even today it still works like a miracle that the whole of the center construction, the financial difficulties, the tremendous amount of work that had to be done on the buildings. With regard to the garden seating area, the terrain, the land and forest, the gardening as well as the public relations and many other things in addition to the mission construction has come about. The members who joined much later probably cannot understand this. But I think that at that time, they would not have been able to get through the whole thing either, as was peculiar to the opposite of the founding members, who held out and trusted you that everything would really succeed.
yes, that was really the case, and it was a hard time, but we made it happen by hook or by crook, always making everything right and making it a success. One could not and must not let one's head hang, because it was and is still necessary to trust that everything will always be for the best and good. It is simply always the case that one leads something to the end and to the goal, through which one will also have success, what one has started once or even starts again. This has always been my motto since my youth, and I have also introduced this as a Figu motto, which has always been accepted, and therefore all have acted according to it, which has always kept us afloat even in the worst times and has brought us forward and the great success that we can all look forward to today with great satisfaction. Basically, we owe the success for the first years from 1977 to 1985 to the commitment of all founding members. And then, when the worst had been done and built and made to work, all the other core group members came along, all of whom used their energies and worked to build up the entire center and mission. They too, as well as the founding members, deserve just as much sincere and great thanks as all external friends and the later passive members, as well as those former core group and passive members who died after years of membership, or who left the FIGU for family or other personal reasons in spite of their great commitment, but kept in contact with the FIGU. But thanks are also due to all those former members who worked diligently in the FIGU for many years, but then for inexplicable reasons suddenly and shamefully insulted, betrayed and abandoned the FIGU and its members, as well as denounced them all over the world with lies and slander, including, unfortunately, the majority of my family. But none of us FIGU members wants to hold them responsible for something in evil, because on the one hand, all of them have to bear their own skin to market, even if they cannot stand before themselves, and on the other hand, we are not their judges. Therefore, we do not have to judge their deeds. So when it comes to the occasional question, as when we have to answer, we can only name the true facts, how they have happened, but it is not up to us to create condemnations because of fallibilities, etc. Our motto is simply that we remember and remember with gratitude all the good and long-standing cooperation of the misguided. But we tacitly dissociate ourselves from the lies and slander that they put into the world against the FIGU and me, as well as against all core group members. For as I said, they must all bear their own skin to market and strive to come clean with their own decency, with their honesty, honor, and dignity, and with their thoughts of guilt and feelings of guilt, and with their conscience.
This is also good and right, because any other action would be detrimental and would only bring anger and problems. Besides, you yourself have always done this and done it well, because a lot of good and valuable things came out of it.
Yes, that is indeed the case, because many people have turned to the FIGU, on the one hand because of the lies and defamations against the FIGU, its members and me, and on the other hand because we did not allow ourselves to be tempted to react badly to them despite many lies and defamations directed against us. And on the other hand, many people came to us and became good friends, etc., because they wanted to find out the real truth on the spot and did not rely on the lies and slander, nor on the intrigues, which were forged by members of my family against me. The FIGU and its members and spread all over the world, to which also filmmakers and journalists were drawn and abused with lies and slander to slanderous video films and newspaper and journal articles. Of course, there were also some journalists for whom I was unfathomably a red scarf and an enemy, and who tried to tear me apart out of hatred, and I know what, in dirty lying and slanderous articles in various journals and newspapers to tear me apart and to lure me out of reserve, which, of course, I did not get involved in, and therefore never got excited about. For my part, I always regarded everything as the ridiculousness of naive and stupid people who were never able to recognize their own stupidity and self-inflicted harm.
This is all in good memory to me, and your actions in this regard have produced good fruits for the mission and the FIGU, which today are picked worldwide and exploited in a very good way.
This can probably no longer be denied even by the worst antagonists, who even today in their stupidity still believe that I must take them seriously as opponents and adversaries. This is because they are deluded. They could refute with incredibly stupid claims and photo montages, etc., all existing analyses made by effective experts, the proofs of correctness and truth regarding the authenticity of the beamship photos, etc., with unbelievably stupid assertions and photo montages, etc.
How do you sometimes say, stupidity does not die out? That is all there is to it.
I have emptied my goiter with it now.
Which I am sure is good for you. But for my part, I consider it very questionable how many people on earth are dishonorable and undignified and can act in the way it has now been brought up.
It has always been the case with you that, as a result of your high mentality, your attitude of consciousness, way of thinking, attitude, conviction, attitude of life, and worldview, You cannot cope with the values in this regard which the majority of Earthlings display as unworthy values. I still know this from the first times of our contacts from your daughter Simyase and from Quetzal, but also from you. Obviously, however, you still have this problem, that you cannot understand these mentally evil, negative, and bad behaviors of Earth humans, and you cannot get used to them.
Which you are right about. Which is why it would also be impossible for us to maintain contact with Earthlings in the same way as with you. This simply refers to personal contacts which are not connected with the mission. This was also the reason why all contacts with Earth humans were of a purely technical telepathic nature, including those with Petra and Anatole. An exception was the contact given by coincidence with an Earth woman named Elsa Schroeder and my daughter Simyase in the surroundings of Zahedin in Persia.
I remember that. It was 1975 or something.
My daughter was very frightened and was hit very badly by the mental vibrations of the woman, after which she was also unwell for several days.
That's what she told me once. But now something else, because I have a question about the drug Captagon, just how it works in the human body. May I openly ask and talk today about what you privately told me 3 years ago under obligation of secrecy?
There's no longer any reason for secrecy.
You told me privately at the time that this drug was being administered to soldiers in various armies in order to turn them into combat and killer robots. In the meantime, I have also read a lot about it. Also that the drug was developed in Germany, and from 1961 in Europe and in the USA against depression was or is used. As a party drug, Captagon is used as a stimulant and in sport as a doping agent. The drug is said to have been banned in 1986, but as you said, it has been used since the IS or Islamist State was established to turn on the IS killers, many of whom, according to your explanation, are drug addicts and dependent on the Captagons sold to the killers by the IS itself. Especially suicide bombers, so you said, stuff themselves with this drug, which is produced in rough masses in drug kitchens in Syria under the care of the regular army and militia, as well as by the IS and spread over Lebanon to the whole Gulf region, as well as to other states of the world, from which also suicide bombers profit, who are addicted to the delusion of being invincible by the drug. But even the regular military, which is involved in combat operations, is stuffing itself with the drug. You also said that the drug trade with Captagon was built up during the Cold War by the Bulgarian Secret Service, but later expanded by a drug mafia. And this, although in real Islam, drugs of any kind are strictly forbidden. I read in an article that if IS killers are fatally injured by shots, they do not even fall down because they are kept on their feet by the power of the drug. The drug is also paranoid and violent when taken on a larger scale and prevents all fear and anxiety. Do you have any further knowledge about the drug and its effects, etc.? And if so, can you explain something about it in a way that we Earthlings can understand?
Captagon, whose trade name is phenethylene, is an amphetamine derivative or a modification of a synthetic drug or amphetamine, such as the drugs ecstasy and speed, etc. Initially, it also acts like an amphetamine and causes the brain to work at full speed. The synapses release more neurotransmitters from adrenaline, dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin, while at the same time preventing the degradation of neurotransmitters. Thus, a firework of synapses is created because the degradation of neurotransmitters is prevented, which further increases the exchange of information between the synapses. In other words, the whole thing means that the brain is completely flooded with respect to the amphetamines of different type in the amount of transmitters that are released. If it is about ecstasy, then this pours out much more serotonin, whereby the human being is attacked in his thought-feeling world by a much bigger block of happiness emotions than normally. The Captagon, on the other hand, concentrates two other messenger substances: dopamine, which stimulates attention and self-confidence, and norepinephrine, which leads to higher performances and powers. This makes man feel like a superhuman, which is why the drug is also administered to the military. who consider themselves to be super fighters and invulnerable, but only as long as the drug works on them, after which they often fall prey to fears. This also contributes to the fact that the physical energy reserves are extremely exhausted by the drug effect and weaken the human being in his exaggerated drive and commitment. So I have to take more and more of the drug again. But gradually, this leads to very bad personality changes and to the complete disintegration of the self, as well as to heart complaints, with heart attacks or strokes being frequent consequences.
Thank you. I'll take care of it. Earlier, I said that people who take a larger amount of Captagon become paranoid. Recently, I have been asked what paranoid means, whether it is not psychopathy, which is not the case, because paranoid is a term that describes a personality disorder that consists of a pattern of profound suspicion and distrust of other people, where paranoids and fellow human beings also believe to see malicious enemies, etc. Psychology and psychiatry are, among other things, also your fields of expertise, which is why I would like to ask you if you can translate something, which is behind the illness paranoia.
Of course. I'd be happy to. First of all, it must be said that earthly psychology and psychiatry are still very ignorant of paranoid disorders and their real effects and backgrounds, and are therefore only able to judge the whole thing to a limited extent. Just as it is not really clear to them that, as a rule, pathologically caused psychopathic factors also interact with paranoid disorders. In a paranoid personality disorder, there are characteristic traits, the main characteristic of which is a profound distrust and suspicion of other people, as can often be associated with a secret and treacherous vindictiveness, which has strange psychopathic forms of personal satisfaction and justification. In paranoids, their pathological personality structure often tends towards numbness and excessive self-esteem, strong self-centeredness, and selfishness, in which psychopathic traits are also integrated, which can quickly lead to degenerations of various kinds. Moreover, paranoid people, in addition to their alien naivety, are still alien to reality in the way that they seek false and fantastic explanations for all sorts of events, occurrences, situations and occurrences in their near and even worldwide surroundings, which they quickly form into conspiracy theories, for which they vehemently stand up and champion to the point of evil abusiveness and quarrels. Paranoid people are often also burdened with psychopathy, although they are also grandiose fantasists and extremely unrealistic towards their fellow human beings, especially with regard to dissenters, other population groups and religious communities, as well as with regard to races, etc. They show negative stereotypes or behavior patterns again and again of the same form and thus in the same way constantly formulaic, cliched and recurring, and as a rule burdened with prejudices even to the point of hatred, insults, and violence. Therefore, it is not uncommon for paranoid groups to form with people of the same nature and with the same ideas, often resulting in malicious fanatical political or religious sects that create violence or religious sectarian slavery. Paranoid people can react to stress with psychotic behavior, because they usually also have psychopathic traits, whereby their attacks can last from a few minutes to hours or even days, and in the worst case, even weeks, whereby in such a disorder, as in any other case in relation to paranoia, an anxiety disorder with panic disorder and agoraphobia or an obsessive-compulsive disorder, depression or schizophrenia can develop. Paranoia often occurs in combination with substance abuse or addiction, with an anxiety-avoiding, borderline, narcissistic, and schizotypal disorder also occurring. Paranoid people have a strong tendency to interpret the behavior of their fellow human beings as hostile, malicious, or even malicious. Even the helpfulness of others, as well as their friendliness, good-naturedness, and well-meaning expressions, actions and advice are distrustfully misjudged as aggressiveness. Consequently, no effective value is attributed to everything, but a devaluing meaning is attributed. As a result of their strong suspicion and mistrust, Paranoids are usually reserved, but when they simply let themselves go, they are extremely hostile, sarcastic, and quarrelsome, provoking other people to devaluate reactions. But this, of course, reinforces the impression of the paranoid person that he is not accepted by his fellow men. So, for example, a humorous remark can also be misunderstood as a bad attack. Paranoid people believe and expect, as a result of their delusional personality disorder, that their fellow human beings will harm them, exploit them, break their power, or deceive them out of pure fear and suspicion, even though they have no objective proof of their delusion. Her delusion leaves no, or only very rarely, and if so, then only very hesitantly and reluctantly, a trust for other people. Paranoid people are so suspicious and distrustful of their delusions that they are constantly afraid that information will be used against them. And it is also a fact that they may make and carry out deceitful plans, insulting their fellow human beings with unjustified insults and misleading and manipulating them through intrigues, lies, and slander, as well as vindictively and unpredictably carrying out actions and showing behavior which causes damage and confusion, etc., for their fellow human beings, etc. This is often done in order to take revenge on one's fellow man, etc., for some unreal reasons. In this way, strong paranoids deal with secret machinations in order to practice revenge, which, however, is usually not noticed by the affected fellow human beings and therefore not recognized. When paranoid setbacks occur, when their secret, vengeful machinations are recognized or rejected, they become overly sensitive, quarrelsome, and angry. Even then, when their secret doing is recognized and it is not appropriate to defend themselves, they insist on their supposed rights or quickly go over to counterattack. Paranoid people are very prone to constant resentment and are resentful for a very long time. Therefore, they are not able to forgive the real or supposed offenses, mistakes, disadvantages, and injuries caused by their fellow human beings. In principle, paranoids also doubt everything and are not able to grasp the effective reality. Following that, they also follow with them friendly people, if they have such people around them at all in honesty, because they repel their fellow human beings through their paranoid delusion and are therefore often only fond of people who know how to profit from and through them, vehemently question their loyalty, which they also transfer to their family members. In addition, paranoid people are extremely jealous, especially of their partners and possible friends, whom they repeatedly and unjustifiably accuse of infidelity and injustice because of their pathological suspicion, mistrust, and egoism. This also makes it clear that paranoids have serious problems with close relationships, whereby they can only rarely or not at all enter into a lasting, good, real, carefree, and valuable connection in relation to a strugglously functioning, durable, and cohesive partnership. As with everything else, their naivety, alien to reality, also plays a major role in this, as a result of which they are unable to perceive effective reality and its truth, let alone to really recognize and understand it. This also leads to paranoid people in their delusion constantly controlling and monitoring their partners and possible friends as well as their own family members in every possible way and trying to provide evidence to confirm and substantiate their pathological and unjustified suspicions. So people with a paranoid personality disorder have a strong desire for absolute control over their fellow human beings. But they are extremely critical of them and can criticize them to the point of insulting them, while they are extremely poor at criticizing their own person. For this reason, they usually try to blame some fellow human beings for their own wrong actions, shortcomings, and failures in order to preserve their own autonomy, which they try to live out.
Thank you for your execution. But can you tell me exactly what the term agoraphobia, which you mentioned at the beginning of your execution, means? Somehow I put the term in context with anxiety disorders, especially anxiety attacks, which occur when crowds of people in public places come into play, but I am not sure.
That's right, because agoraphobia is what you're assuming. The anxiety disorder with the worst effects is the panic disorder with agoraphobia. Panic disorders correspond to unexpectedly recurring panic attacks, which are triggered not by external but by internal circumstances. These can be so bad that they make people think they are going to die or go crazy. Panic attacks of this kind can be so severe that they trigger symptoms similar to those of a real heart attack and intimidate and unsettle even the mentally strongest people. As a rule, those affected avoid public places and crowds of people, which is called agoraphobia. The almost permanent fear of a panic attack triggers severe internal tension in humans, which triggers vegetative symptoms that are then supposedly misinterpreted as signs of an incipient panic attack, which of course increases and intensifies the tension and ultimately can actually trigger a panic attack. People affected by such panic attacks, who are cheerful, independent, and unconcerned, become mentally ill over time, have no confidence in themselves, have to be treated, often become addicted to alcohol and drugs, and ultimately need constant support, without which they are no longer able to survive. Of course, severe depression is also associated with this, and the whole thing ultimately ends in suicide.
And unfortunately, there are many human beings with such ailments. But what you have said about paranoid and psychopathic people also applies to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, about which we have already spoken on several occasions. But the satellites around them are not able to recognize and not understand what is actually going on with the woman and what her paranoid psychopathic behavior and action actually aims at.
We do not have to go into that any further now, because I still have the following to discuss with you.